In the 1890s in Florence, the wax chandler's warm back room is yours, and your hands are already faintly scented with beeswax before the morning has fully opened. There is no hurry here, only the soft patience of melting, dipping, cooling, and beginning again. We'll stay close to the bench tonight, where the light comes in pale over the Arno side of the city, and the first sound is the low scrape of your chair against the stone floor. The shop is still cool from the night. The shutters hold back the street for a little while longer, and the room smells of wax, cotton wick, old wood, and the thin ghost of smoke from yesterday's lamps. In 1890s Florence, a wax chandler's day begins before the customers arrive, while the city is still half dreaming behind its shutters. You stand in the small workroom behind the shop, where the ceiling is darkened by years of gentle heat. Nothing here is grand, though Florence has grandeur everywhere, in church fronts and bell towers, and stone palaces that catch the dawn. Here, the beauty is quieter. It lives in the rows of molds on the shelf, the hanging cords of wick, the round pans, the careful knife, the smooth blocks of pale wax wrapped in cloth. You know where each thing belongs. The first task is always warmth. You coax the stove awake, not fiercely, just enough to bring the water beneath the melting pan to a steady heat. Beeswax dislikes haste. It softens in its own time, first holding its shape, then slumping at the edges, then giving itself over into a golden pool that catches the room's dim light. You watch it the way another person might watch weather. Outside, Florence begins to stir. A cart passes over stone with a hollow wooden clatter. Somewhere, a woman calls across a courtyard. A church bell marks the hour, with a sound that seems to arrive through walls, dust, and time. You lift a lid, and warm sweetness rises into your face. Thick but clean, with a faint smell of honeycomb and sun. Your hands have learned the morning without needing much thought. You check the wicks first, running cotton between finger and thumb to feel for knots or uneven twist. A candle is only as steady as its wick. Too thin, and the flame starves. Too thick, and it gutters. Too loose, and it bends inside the wax, making trouble later when some priest, housekeeper, or old widow expects a clean and faithful burn. You cut lengths and lay them across the bench. The knife has a wooden handle rubbed smooth by use. Its blade is not beautiful, but it's familiar, and that matters more in a workshop. You tie the wicks to a dipping frame, spacing them with the care of someone setting out laundry on a windless day. Each thread hangs straight, pale, and waiting. In Florence, many candles still have church work in them. Gaslight has changed streets and shops, and electric lamps are beginning to be spoken of with interest and worry, but churches still ask for wax. Chapels need altar candles, votive lights, candles for processions, candles for feast days, and candles for the long, quiet hours when people step in from the street and leave a small flame behind them. Your work moves through the city without ever needing to announce itself. You lift the frame and lower the wicks into the melted wax. The motion is slow, down into warmth, pause, up again into cooler air. The first coat is barely anything, a thin skin clinging to cotton, but it matters. You hang the frame over the tray and let the wax set. Drops fall with soft ticks. The candle begins as almost nothing, and in that almost nothing, your day finds its rhythm. The shop front is still closed, but dust shows in the line of light beneath the door. You hear footsteps outside now, a pair of them, then three, then the uneven roll of a handcart. Florence has many kinds of mourning. There is the tourist mourning near the great squares, full of looking and pointing. There is the market mourning, loud with baskets and bargaining. And there is your mourning, held in the back room, where heat rises slowly and every movement leaves a trace. You dip again. The wax builds in layers too thin to admire at first. Down, pause, up, hang. Down, pause, up, hang. The frame grows heavier by a little each time, and your wrist notices before your eyes do. The candles fatten evenly if you keep your hand steady, if the wax stays warm, if the room does not turn too cold too quickly. So much of the work is listening to small conditions. A wax chandler in 1890s, Florence is partly craftsperson, partly housekeeper, partly weather reader. You notice drafts before anyone else would. You know which corner cools the wax too sharply in winter. You know when a pan has grown too hot by the smell, just slightly sharper, no longer soft and honeyed. You know the feel of a good surface, neither tacky nor brittle, under a careful fingertip. By now the stove has settled into its own breathing. The water beneath the pan murmurs, and the wax shifts with a slow gleam when you stir it. You keep the stirring rod moving gently, because clean wax is patient but not careless. Specks must be watched for. Old bits of wick, dust from storage, and crumbs of darker wax can spoil the pale finish wanted for altar candles. You skim what needs skimming, and set the little scraps aside, because nothing useful is wasted here. The beeswax itself may have come from hives outside the city, from Tuscan farms where bees worked among clover, acacia, chestnut, and orchard bloom. By the time it reaches your bench, it has already passed through many hands. Someone cut comb from a hive. Someone pressed honey away. Someone melted and strained the wax through cloth. You receive it as a quiet substance, but it carries fields inside it, and the slow labor of insects you never saw. You don't think about all of that every morning, of course. Most days, you think about whether the order for San Lorenzo is ready, whether the blue paper wrapping is dry, whether the apprentice has trimmed the wick ends too close again. Still, when the wax warms, it has memory in it. You can smell summer in winter. You can smell hillside sun while the stone floor chills your boots. The first tray of dipped candles hangs beside the bench, cooling into shape. You turn them now and then, checking for uneven shoulders or strange ridges. A fine candle should have a calm surface. It should not look hurried. Your thumb smooths a small swelling while the wax is still yielding, and the touch leaves no mark if you know when to stop. That is one of the gentle arts of the work, stopping at the right moment. Soon you open the shutters. The street enters the shop in pieces. A ribbon of cold air, the smell of damp stone, a passing voice, the dull shine of morning on the threshold. The shop front is narrow, with shelves set close to the walls. Candles stand in bundles. Some are thick and plain. Some are slender, almost elegant. Some wait in boxes, wrapped for delivery, their paper tied with string. You step back into the workroom and bring out yesterday's molded candles. They have rested long enough. The metal molds are cool now, arranged in rows like quiet pipes, each one holding a finished candle inside. Molded candles are different from dipped ones. They ask less of the wrist and more of preparation. The wick must be centered, the mold clean, the wax poured at the right heat, and the cooling slow enough to keep the candle from cracking or drawing away too harshly. You loosen a candle from its mold with a practiced twist. There is a soft release, almost a sigh, and the smooth column slides into your hand. It's heavier than it looks. Pale wax carries weight in a dense, modest way. You hold it near the window and turn it once. The surface catches light without shining too much. Good. The base needs trimming, and the top needs its wick freed neatly, but the body is sound. This is the part of the day when small corrections gather. You trim bases with the knife, shaving thin curls from the bottom so the candles stand straight. The shavings fall like pale petals onto the bench, and you sweep them into a dish for remelting. Your hands move from candle to candle, and each one asks the same question in a slightly different voice. Is it straight? Is it clean? Will it burn as promised? A customer knocks before the door is fully latched open. You wipe your hands on your apron and step into the shop. It is a housekeeper from a nearby palazzo, wrapped in a dark shawl, with a basket over one arm. She wants candles that won't smoke in the dining room and smaller ones for the servants' stairs. She speaks in the practical way of someone who knows exactly how a house uses light. You listen, because a chandler must listen well. You bring out a bundle of household candles. Not the finest beeswax, but clean and reliable. By the 1890s, many candles are made with stearin or paraffin mixtures, harder and cheaper than beeswax, useful for ordinary rooms where holiness is not the question. You know the difference by smell, by color, by the way the knife meets the body. Beeswax feels alive in a way the others do not, but every kind has its place. The housekeeper weighs the bundle in her hand. People always do that. They test candles by weight, by straightness, by the promise of them. You wrap the order in paper and tie the string with 2 turns and a small knot. Coins touch the counter with a faint bright sound. Then she goes, taking a little of your morning with her, and the shop settles again. Back in the workroom, the dipped candles are ready for another layer. You lift the frame. It is heavier now, and the candles swing slightly, not enough to touch. Down into the wax, slow and even, up into the cooling air. A drop gathers at the lower tip of each candle, stretching, trembling, then falling into the tray. The sound is tiny, but after years at the bench, you hear it clearly. You may have begun this trade as a child, or as a young apprentice sent to sweep floors and carry water before being trusted with wick and wax. The old work teaches by repetition. No one explains every lesson in words. You learn by standing near the heat, by watching the master's hand, by being corrected gently or sharply, depending on the day. You learn that clean tools save trouble. You learn that wax remembers mistakes. The apprentice, if there is one in your shop, comes in with cold fingers and hair still damp from the morning. You give him the sweeping first. Dust is the enemy of pale candles, and sweeping teaches the floor before it teaches the trade. He moves carefully around the tubs and pans. The broom whispers over stone. Outside, the city grows louder, but in here the sounds remain small enough to hold. You show him the wicks again, not because he hasn't seen them, but because seeing is not the same as knowing. You let him feel a good twist and a poor one. You let him bend a finished candle and understand firmness without brittleness. You let him smell wax that is clean and wax that has been overheated. The nose learns quietly. The fingers learn more quietly still. In the Florence of your day, old work and new invention stand side by side without asking permission. A gas lamp may glow beyond the shop at dusk, while inside your shelves hold candles for bedrooms, sick rooms, churches, kitchens, and shops that still prefer a flame they can carry. A candle is not only light, it is portable time. It is a small measured burning, made by your hands so someone else may see. The morning deepens, and the room warms enough that your shoulders loosen. You pour more wax into the pan, watching the solid pieces soften along their edges. The apprentice ties wicks for molded candles, his tongue pressed slightly against his lip in concentration. You pretend not to notice, because some kinds of effort are best left undisturbed. The clock ticks above the shelf, slow and dry. When the wax is ready, you prepare the molds. Each one must be clean inside, without old wax clinging in ridges. You warm them slightly so the new wax won't seize too fast. The wick runs through the center, held taut at the bottom and top. If it leans, the candle will burn badly, hollowing one side or drowning itself in its own pool. Straightness is a hidden kindness. You pour with a ladle, steady and close. The wax enters the mold with a soft, thick sound, not quite liquid like water, not quite heavy like oil. It fills the narrow shape and settles around the wick. A little hollow will form as it cools, and you'll top it up later. You do not mind this. The candle changes as it rests, and your work includes returning to it. There is comfort in tasks that ask to be revisited. You pour, set aside, pour again. You dip, hang, dip again. You trim, inspect, wrap, and carry. The day is made of circles, and the circles are not empty. Each return makes the thing more itself. Each small pass of the hand gives the candle a better chance to burn cleanly in some room you may never enter. At mid-morning, a priest's assistant arrives with a list folded twice. The order is for a side chapel, for votive candles, and for 2 larger altar candles needed before a feast day. He smells faintly of cold incense and wool. You take the paper and smooth it on the counter. Church orders require care, not because household orders do not, but because the candles will stand where many eyes rest and where people bring their quietest hopes. For church candles, beeswax is preferred, and in many places required in certain proportions, because its clean burn and old association with purity belong to the language of worship. You know the rules well enough, though you are not a scholar of them. Your knowledge sits in your hands. You know which wax is pale enough, which batch is steady enough, which candles have the dignity needed for an altar. You show the assistant 2 finished examples. He nods, touching neither until you offer one. People often hesitate with fine candles, as if touching them might mark them. You understand that. A pale beeswax candle has a quiet presence before it ever burns. It stands with all its future light still held inside. The assistant gives the date, spoken softly, and you repeat it, so the order is fixed between you. After he leaves, the shop carries a faint trace of incense for several minutes. It mingles with wax and warm metal, making the workroom smell almost like a chapel storeroom. You return to the molds, topping up the centers where cooling has drawn the wax down. The ladle leaves a round shine at each opening. The apprentice watches, and this time you let him top the last one himself. He spills a little, not much. A thin run of wax trails along the mold and begins to harden. You hand him the scraper without a word, and he cleans it while the lesson is still warm. That is how the trade enters a person, not through grand instruction, but through little repairs made before they become larger ones. By midday, the work has changed its temperature, and the Florence Wax Chandler's room feels less like morning preparation and more like a small, steady engine of light. The stove has been burning for hours now. The stone floor is still cool at the edges, but near the bench the air is soft against your face. You can smell your own apron when you move, a deep mixture of wax, smoke, cotton, and the dust of the shop. Your fingers are tacky in places, smooth in others. Even after washing, a chandler's hands keep the day. You pause for bread, cheese, and perhaps a little wine thinned with water. You eat near the back door where a narrow slice of daylight falls across the wall. The apprentice eats quickly, because youth often mistakes speed for hunger. You eat slowly. Bread tastes different in a workshop, with wax cooling nearby and the stove murmuring at your back. Crumbs are brushed from the table at once. Cleanliness is not fussiness here. It's part of the craft. The city outside is fully awake now. Hooves strike stone. Wheels grind and knock. Voices rise, overlap and fade. Florence is changing in these years, with old quarters altered, streets widened, and new ideas moving through ancient walls. Yet your shop keeps an older clock. It measures time by cooling wax, by wick length, by the number of dips needed to bring a candle from thread to finished form. After the meal, you return to the dipped candles. They have grown into themselves. Each one is still slightly uneven, because dipped candles carry the memory of gravity. You warm a trimming board and roll them gently, correcting a curve while the wax can still listen. The motion is light. Too much pressure would flatten them. Too little would do nothing. Your palms know the middle way. There is a low pleasure in this part of the work. It is not excitement, and it does not need to be. It is the pleasure of seeing a row become orderly under your hands. A candle that leaned now stands true. A rough surface smooths. A thickened base is pared away. The bench gathers curls, scraps, and little beads of wax, all pale and reusable, all returning eventually to the pan. You sort the candles by purpose. Household tapers in one tray, church tapers in another, thick utility candles together, small votive lights near the molds where they were made. Sorting is a kind of thinking. The shelves make sense because you make sense of them, and when a customer enters asking for light, you know which kind of light they mean. A young woman comes in during the warmest part of the day, asking for small candles for a sick room. Her voice is low. You do not ask more than needed. A chandler learns that candles accompany private hours. Birth, illness, prayer, reading, mending, keeping watch beside someone who sleeps badly. You wrap the candles softly, choosing ones that burn evenly and do not smoke. She thanks you with her eyes lowered, and the bell above the door gives one small sound as she leaves. For a while afterward, you work more quietly. The room seems to understand. You trim wicks to the proper length, leaving enough for easy lighting, but not so much that the first flame flares too high. The scissors make a neat clicking sound. Click, turn, click. Set aside. The pile of trimmed ends grows like dark threads in your palm. You brush them into a tin. Candles are simple only to those who never made them. You know how many things can go wrong. Wax can crack, smoke, tunnel, bend, bloom or sweat. Wicks can curl badly or drown. Molds can hold old residue. Heat can rise too quickly. Cold air can spoil a finish. But the answers are not dramatic. They are ordinary answers. Clean the mold. Watch the heat. Center the wick. Wait long enough. The waiting is part of the job, and perhaps part of why the work suits the evening mind so well. You cannot force wax to cool by wishing at it. You cannot make a dipped candle thick in one pass without ruining its shape. You return, again and again, and the candle becomes useful by accepting layer after layer. In a world that often asks people to hurry, the wax refuses politely. Afternoon light enters differently through the shop window. It is flatter, more golden, catching dust along the shelves and showing the fingerprints on the counter. You wipe the counter with a cloth warmed in your hand. The cloth smells faintly of lye soap. Outside, someone laughs sharply. Then the sound breaks apart and disappears down the street. Inside, your ladle rests against the pan with its handle dark from years of use. You take up the ladle again, and the afternoon resumes with a slow shine. The wax is settled into a clear golden warmth, and when you stir it, the surface folds over itself like heavy silk. You check the dipped candles with the side of your thumb. They are firm enough for handling, but still kind enough to receive correction. In the 1890s Florence Wax Chandler's shop, this is one of the quietest hours. When customers thin, the street heat gathers, and the work becomes almost entirely a conversation between your hands and the wax. You begin preparing the altar candles promised for the church assistant. They are longer than the household tapers, broader at the base, and plain in the dignified way church things often are. You measure each wick against the wooden rule fixed to the bench, where years of use have darkened the marks. The cotton must be scented with more care than usual, because a large candle makes a large confession if the wick wanders. You pull each strand taut, tie it, and test it with a gentle flick of your finger. The molds for these larger candles are kept apart. They are clean, polished inside, and wrapped when not in use to keep dust from settling in their long hollows. You warm them near the stove, turning them now and then so the heat reaches evenly. Metal has its own patience, just as wax does. Too cold, and it chills the pour too quickly. Too hot, and the wax may shrink strangely when cooling. Your palm hovers near the mold, reading warmth without touching too long. You strain the melted beeswax through cloth before using it for the church order. The cloth is held over a clean vessel, and the wax passes through in a slow, shining ribbon. Small flecks remain behind, caught like bits of dusk in the weave. The smell grows stronger as the wax moves, sweet and faintly floral, with a warm animal depth beneath it. You breathe it in without thinking. After years in this work, the scent is not decoration. It is a sign of quality, temperature, and readiness. The first pour is steady. You bring the ladle close to the mold's mouth, and the wax descends without splashing, filling the space around the wick. The sound is soft, almost secret, like thick rain inside a narrow pipe. You pour one mold, then another, then pause to look across the row. Each wick stands upright, held at the top by a small crosspiece. Each mold receives the same care, because no candle knows whether it will burn before a crowd or beside one kneeling person. The apprentice watches from the side, quieter than he was at breakfast. Afternoon has settled him too. You let him hold the empty ladle, just long enough to feel its weight, and understand that pouring is not only a matter of the wrist, it belongs to the whole arm, to balance, to breath, to the small pause before motion. He nods, though he cannot yet know how many years are hidden inside such a simple gesture. Once the first row is filled, you set the ladle down and wipe the rim of each mold. Little beads of wax gather there and must be removed before they harden into rough collars. Your cloth grows stiff where the wax cools in its fibers. You fold it to a clean corner and continue. This is not fussy work. It is finishing the sentence properly. A candle begins with heat, but it earns its clean appearance through these small acts of attention. The light in the shop shifts again, and you notice it on the floor before you notice it on the wall. A long bar of sun reaches farther across the stone, touching the lower shelf where wrapped bundles wait. The Florence afternoon carries warmth through the doorway now, and the air smells of dust, horse sweat, bread, and the faint river damp that sometimes rises from the Arno. You stand in the doorway for one breath, then return to the back room. By afternoon, the work has moved from making to tending, and in the Florence Wax Chandler's shop you begin to follow every candle through its slower changes. The large molds cool in their row, and you do not disturb them too soon. Wax is firm on the outside before it is settled within. You have learned this from cracked candles, from hollow centers, from all the little disappointments that teach a trade more firmly than success. So you leave the row alone and take up another task. There are votive lights to prepare, small cups of wax meant to burn briefly and faithfully, each one a modest promise of flame. These smaller candles are made in little metal cups or shallow molds, depending on the order. You set them out across the bench like tiny bowls. The wicks are short and already tabbed or knotted, and you place them in the center with tweezers blackened near the tips. Your fingers would be too broad for such work. The tweezers have a springy resistance, and each wick leans until the wax steadies it. You line them up, one after another, without letting your mind run ahead. A small candle has its own dignity. It will not stand tall on an altar. It will not light a dining room or guide someone up a stair. But it may hold a prayer for an hour, and that is enough work for any flame. You pour the wax carefully, letting it rise around the little wick until only the dark thread remains above the surface. The cups gleam briefly, then dull as the wax cools. The apprentice counts them softly. You correct him when he skips one, but you keep your voice low. Counting has a rhythm in the shop, and a wrong rhythm leads to a wrong order wrapped at the end of the day. He starts again, touching the bench beside each candle rather than the candle itself. That is better. You nod once, and he continues, his voice barely above the stove's murmur. From the front room comes the faint sound of someone lifting the latch. You wipe your hands and step through the curtain. An older man stands near the counter, hat in hand, looking at the shelf of tall candles. He wants a pair for a family table, not costly, but good enough for Sunday. You bring down two choices, one pale and one more cream-colored, explaining the difference in plain words. He listens as if the matter deserves respect, which it does. He chooses the cream-colored pair. You wrap them in paper and tuck the ends so the wax will not rub against his coat. He tells you that his daughter is coming home with her husband. You smile gently, because there is nothing more needed than that. Candles are often bought for occasions no one writes down. A meal, a vigil, a return, a small attempt to make a room softer than usual. Your shop supplies these things without needing to know the whole story. When the door closes behind him, the bell's little tremble remains in the room. You stand for a moment among the shelves, listening to the street outside and the muffled heat behind you. The Florence Wax Chandler's work is not separate from the city. It is threaded through its rooms and churches, its sickbeds, kitchens, stairways, and feast tables. You may stay mostly in this narrow shop, yet your candles travel farther than your feet. Back at the bench, the votive lights have begun to cloud at the edges. The centers remain glossy. You resist the urge to touch them. Instead, you turn to the scraps from the morning, sorting pale beeswax from other blends. The purer scraps return to the beeswax pan. The household remnants go into another container. Mixed wax has uses, but you keep the finer material apart. Good order today saves confusion tomorrow. The bench has become crowded now. Finished tapers rest in shallow trays. Molds cool near the wall. Votive cups sit in rows. Wick reels lie near the trimming knife. You make space by putting each finished thing where it belongs. Your arms know the distances. Shelf to bench, bench to pan, pan to cooling rack to wrapping table. In a small shop, movement must be economical, not because anyone demands it, but because clutter steals calm from the hands. You top up the large altar molds as the wax contracts. Each one has formed a small sunken place near the wick. You pour into that hollow, just enough to fill it level again. The new wax shines brighter than the cooled surface around it, then slowly turns the same soft color. This is one of those repairs no customer may ever notice. But you notice, and the candle notices in the way it burns. Afternoon heat makes the wax smell fuller. It also makes you slower, which is not always a fault. You lift a cup of water and drink, tasting metal from the dipper. The apprentice has gone quiet, scraping wax from a tray with careful strokes. Scrape, pause, scrape. The sound is dry and delicate. Outside, a cart driver calls to his horse, and the call rises briefly above the street, before folding back into ordinary noise. You think of the hives beyond Florence, though only in passing. Beeswax comes to you as blocks and cakes, but somewhere it began in small hexagonal rooms, warmed by bodies, filled and emptied, cut and pressed. The chandler's shop is not a farm, yet summer enters here in stored form. When you melt wax in winter, you release a little June into the room. When you pour it in summer, the scent seems almost to recognize itself. A boy arrives with a delivery basket from another shop, bringing paper, string, and a packet of blue wrapping sheets. The paper is smooth, not too thin, and you rub a corner between finger and thumb before accepting it. Bad paper tears around candle ends, damp paper stains. Good paper folds quietly and holds its crease. You pay the boy, and he darts back into the street, leaving a small rush of hot air behind him. You lay the new paper in a drawer to keep it clean. The drawer smells of dry wood and old string. There are labels there too, simple printed slips with the shop's name and street. Nothing grand. You use them for larger orders, especially those carried to churches or respectable houses where servants receive parcels at the door. A label is a small courtesy. It tells the next pair of hands where the work came from. When the light through the front window grows lower, the task turns toward finishing, and the 1890s Florence Wax Chandler begins to make the day's work ready for other rooms. You take the first tray of household tapers to the wrapping table. They are cool now, firm, and faintly satin to the touch. You sort them by length, then by straightness, setting aside any that lean too much for ordinary sale. Those will be remelted or used in the shop, depending on the floor. Nothing is treated with anger. A failed candle is not a tragedy. It is simply material returning to the beginning. You bring the trimming knife across each base. The motion is smooth, and the wax gives way in thin curls. A flat base matters even for a candle that may be placed in a holder, because a crooked beginning encourages a crooked burn. You test a few upright on the bench. They stand, pale and still. The apprentice watches you from the corner of his eye, copying the angle of your hand on his own smaller batch. The wrapping begins with 6 candles laid side by side. You fold paper over them, press lightly, tuck one side, then the other. String passes around the bundle with a dry whisper. You tie the knot close, but not tight enough to bite into the wax. A good bundle should feel secure, not strangled. You trim the string ends with scissors and set the parcel in a shallow crate. Then you begin again. There is a pleasure in repeated wrapping. Paper smooths under your palm. String finds its path. The bundles gather in rows, each one containing work too slow to see all at once. A customer will untie the string quickly, perhaps without thinking, and that is as it should be. The making belongs here. The using belongs elsewhere. Your task is to send the candles out ready, asking no attention except a match and a little care. For the church order, you choose heavier paper and softer cloth at the ends. Tall altar candles bruise less easily than fruit, but they can dent, and a dent catches light in the wrong way. You wrap each one separately. The paper tightens around the smooth column, and your hands move with a certain reverence, not theatrical, not pious in a showy way, just careful, because the object asks for care. The priest's assistant will return tomorrow, but you prepare the order now. Tomorrow brings its own work, and the Florence Wax Chandler, who leaves everything for morning, soon learns the morning is already full. You write the order mark in plain script. Your pen scratches across the label, and the ink smells sharp for a moment amid all the wax and paper. The label dries beside the window where the air moves gently. The apprentice is sent to sweep again. Evening dust has gathered in corners, and scraps have wandered under the bench. He uses the broom more skillfully now than he did in the morning, angling it around the legs of the table, drawing everything into a small, pale pile. You crouch and pick out any clean wax worth saving. Dusty scraps go elsewhere. Clean scraps return. The distinction is simple, and simple things hold the shop together. A woman in black enters near the end of the afternoon, asking for a single candle. Fine, but not large. Her gloves are worn at the fingertips. You show her a slender beeswax taper with a clean scent and a steady wick. She does not ask the price at first. She holds it carefully, then asks. You lower your voice when you answer, not out of pity, but because the shop itself seems to request it. She buys the candle. You wrap it in a narrow strip of paper, leaving no label, because some purchasers prefer privacy. Her coin is warm from her hand. When she leaves, you watch only long enough to see that she has tucked the candle safely into her basket. Then you return to the bench. A shopkeeper sees many little human weather changes in a day, and the kindest thing is often to let them pass without comment. You dip the last small batch of tapers before the wax is allowed to cool too far. This batch is not for an order, but for stock, because a shelf with gaps has an uneasy look. The room is dimmer now, and the wax glows more deeply in the pan. Each lowering of the frame feels slower than it did in the morning. Your wrist is tired. You adjust your grip, breathe once, and continue. Down into warmth, up into air. The candles hang and drip. You listen to the small ticks falling into the tray. The apprentice has stopped sweeping and is watching again, though he thinks you do not see him. You let him watch. Some motions cannot be taught by lecture. They must be stored in the eye, then attempted badly, then corrected over many days until the body accepts them. As evening begins to lean into the street, the shop takes on the mixed scent of cooling wax, swept dust, paper, and the first smoke from lamps nearby. Florence changes color outside. Stone goes from warm cream to gray gold. Windows catch brief fire, then dull. The bell above your door hangs still. The shelves, stocked again, seem to withdraw into shadow, their bundles and tapers waiting like quiet citizens of a small waxen town. You light a shop candle from one kept near the counter. It is not a fine candle, only a useful one made from leftovers clean enough for your own use. The flame catches the wick, hesitates, then steadies. Its light is modest beside the day, but the day is leaving. You set it in a holder where it can shine across the counter without leaning too near the paper. A chandler respects flame because flame is the final customer. The last customer of the open day is often someone in need of ordinary light. Tonight it is a young clerk with ink on his cuff. wanting candles for a rented room where the lamp smokes. He smells faintly of paper and rain-damp wool, though no rain has fallen. You give him a small bundle of reliable household candles. He asks whether they will last long enough for evening work. You tell him they will, if he keeps the wick trimmed. He nods as if that is a new thought, and perhaps it is. Not everyone understands that a flame needs tending. Too long a wick gives smoke and waste. Too short, and the light weakens. You explain it simply, using the shop candle as an example, and trim its wick with the scissors. The flame lowers, steadies, and burns cleaner. The clerk smiles, pays, and leaves with his parcel tucked beneath his arm. After the door closes, you stand for a while with the scissors still in your hand. The lesson is small, but many things are. Keep the wick trimmed, keep the wax clean, keep the heat steady. Return to the task before trouble hardens. A trade teaches practical rules first, and only later do you notice they have followed you into the rest of life, softly, without asking to be named. By the time the door is latched, the Florence Wax Chandler's work has not ended, only folded inward from the street to the bench again. You turn the sign, lower the shutter part way, and let the shop grow dim around you. The city remains outside, with its wheels, bells, footsteps, and late voices. But the workroom gathers itself into a more private quiet. You carry the shop candle to the back. Its flame bends as you walk, then straightens when you set it near the stove. The light touches the pan, the molds, and the hanging tapers with a soft amber edge. The wax in the main pan must be dealt with before it cools completely. You skim the surface once more, then ladle what remains into a storage vessel for tomorrow. It falls in thick folds, slower now, already losing heat. The smell is deeper than morning wax, less floral and more toasted, with a faint trace of metal from the pan. You scrape the sides gently, gathering what will come easily and leaving what needs warming another day. Cleaning is part of making. You wipe tools while they are warm, because cold wax clings stubbornly. The ladle is rubbed with cloth until its bowl is mostly clear. The stirring rod is scraped along a wooden edge. The trimming knife is cleaned and dried. You check the scissors, opening and closing them near your ear, hearing the small rasp where wax has gathered near the hinge. A pin clears it. The blades close cleanly again. The apprentice carries water carefully, both hands around the pail. He has grown slower at last, which is often the first sign that a beginner has started to see the room. You ask him to wipe the molds that are empty and leave the cooling ones undisturbed. He repeats the instruction under his breath. It is good to hear him do that. A workshop is full of things that look ready before they are ready. You check the altar molds once more. They are still warm, but not hot. Tomorrow, if all has gone well, the candles will release cleanly. You touch the outside of one mold with the back of your fingers. The metal holds the day's last heat. Inside, the wax is becoming firm in darkness, surrounding the wick, taking on the smooth shape you prepared for it. The hidden part of the work continues without you. There are accounts to mark before you leave. You sit at the small desk near the front room, where the candlelight pools over the ledger. The pages smell of paper, dust, and old ink. You write the housekeeper's purchase, the church order, the small sick-room bundle, the clerk's candles. Your pen moves slowly enough to keep the figures clear. Ink shines when fresh, then sinks into dullness as it dries. Numbers in a ledger are not cold to you. They are bundles wrapped, wax used, wick remaining, coins paid, promises due. You know the shape of the week by them. A feast day changes the columns. A wet season changes household buying. A death in a known family may appear only as one fine candle, bought quietly. The ledger records business, but beneath business lie rooms, meals, prayers, and long evenings. The apprentice waits near the door, trying not to look tired. His shoulders have dropped. There is wax beneath one fingernail and dust on one knee. You give him a small end of candle to take home, not fine, but clean and useful. He accepts it with more care than he would accept a coin. Light made by the day's labor has a way of feeling like a private reward. When he leaves, the shop grows larger in its silence. You listen to his steps fade down the street, then return to the workroom for the last round. Every pan is covered, every wick reel is tucked away, the paper drawer is closed, the clean scraps are stored, and the dirty scraps set apart. The broom leans in its corner. You move slowly because fatigue has entered your arms, but the slowness suits the hour. The floor holds a faint pattern of the day. Here, a pale smudge where wax fell and was scraped up. There, a darker place near the stove where boots have turned for years. The stones are uneven beneath your soles. In winter, they keep cold like memory. In summer, they release the day's warmth after sunset. Tonight, they are neither warm nor cold, only solid, and you are grateful for their steadiness. You snuff the stove down, leaving only what must die safely in its own time. Heat retreats from the room by degrees. The smell changes as flame gives way to cooling iron and settled wax. You stand with your hands near the last warmth, not touching, just feeling it fade. There is a tiredness in you now, but it is a clean one, made of lifting, trimming, pouring, wrapping, and listening. A chandler's work belongs to darkness as much as light. You make candles because rooms become dark, because streets empty, because people wake in the night and need to cross a floor safely. You make them because churches hold early masses and late prayers, because kitchens begin before dawn, because sick rooms need a flame low enough not to trouble the sleeper. Your labor continues when you are not present, burning quietly in other hands. The candle on the desk has shortened. A small pool of melted wax rests near its wick, clear at the center and clouded at the rim. You trim it once more before it smokes. The little cut end falls into the tray. The flame steadies, smaller and cleaner. You watch it for a moment. Even after a whole day among candles, a steady flame can still draw the eye. Outside, Florence is moving toward evening meals. You hear shutters opening and closing, a dish set down somewhere, a burst of conversation from people passing close to the shop front. The city is old, but every evening it becomes particular again, made from today's footsteps and today's smoke. Your shop is one small chamber inside that larger breathing. It smells of wax because you have given the day that shape. Before you leave, you inspect the shelves in the front room. This is habit, and habit is one of the workshop's gentlest forms of memory. Household candles to the left, better beeswax above, small votives in their trays, larger wrapped orders below, away from careless elbows. The counter is clear except for the shop candle, the scissors, and the ledger closed beneath your hand. You lift the ledger and place it in the drawer. The wood slides with a soft complaint. You lock the cash box, then test it once, not because you doubt the lock, but because testing ends the thought. The scissors return to their place. The shop candle remains, because you still need its light. Shadows gather in the corners, and the wrapped candles become pale shapes rather than separate things. There is a tenderness in seeing the shop this way, after the day's usefulness has been arranged and put to rest. Customers see the front room awake, shelves ready and counter open. You see it in between, when objects stop asking to be handled. The bundles sit quietly. The molds cool behind the curtain. The air holds all the work, but the work no longer presses forward. It waits for morning with the patience of stored light. The next day's tasks begin to assemble themselves in your mind. Release the altar candles. Inspect the votive batch. Prepare more household tapers. Send the church order if the assistant arrives. Check the supply of cotton wick before the week ends. None of these thoughts are urgent. They pass like small boats along a slow river, each one visible for a moment, then drifting beyond the candle's little circle. You take off your apron and shake it outside the back door. A few crumbs of wax fall onto the ground, catching briefly in the dimness. The apron is stiff in places and soft in others. It smells so strongly of the shop. that you hardly notice until cooler air touches it. You hang it on its peg, where it takes the shape of a person who has stepped away. The back room looks different without the apron against you. You are no longer fully inside the roll, though your hands still carry it. Wax remains near your nails. A thin sheen lives in the lines of your skin. Even washing will not remove the scent entirely, and perhaps you would not want it to. The day has marked you gently, as honest work often does, leaving traces without making a speech. As night gathers beyond the shutters, the Florence Wax Chandler's shop becomes a quieter kind of workshop, one that keeps its warmth folded inside metal, paper, and cooling wax. You wash at the basin with water gone cool. The shock is mild and welcome. Soap loosens the surface wax, but not all of it. You rub each finger carefully, turning the knuckles, cleaning the places where wick fibers cling. The water clouds slightly. A faint film drifts on top, catching candlelight. You dry your hands on a rough cloth, and the cloth rasps pleasantly against your palms. There is still a small repair to make before leaving, because small repairs dislike being ignored. One of the dipping frames has a loose peg. You noticed it in the afternoon when the candles swung a little wider than they should. Now you take it to the bench, sit close to the candle, and tighten the peg with a narrow tool. The wood creaks softly. You test the frame by lifting it and giving it a gentle shake. Better. Tools are companions in this work, though no one needs to say so aloud. The frame, the ladle, the knife, the molds, the scissors, the rule, the scraper. Each one has a preferred grip and a known fault. The ladle handle warms too slowly in winter. The knife catches if the base is too cold. One mold releases cleanly only if turned slightly to the left. You remember these things because the work has taught you to remember. You run your hand along the bench, feeling for hardened drops. One hides near the far edge. Your fingernail finds it, and the scraper lifts it cleanly. It lands in your palm. A small, cold flake, almost weightless. You put it with the other clean scraps. Such a tiny saving might seem foolish to someone passing through, but a chandler knows that usefulness often gathers from fragments. The shop candle burns lower. Its flame has made a small hollow and a rim of softened wax. You tilt your head and listen. A candle sometimes speaks in little sounds, faint ticks and whispers as the wick consumes itself. This one burns cleanly. The flame is blue at its root, yellow above, and steady enough that the shadow of your hand moves only when you move. You take comfort in that. You sit for a moment on the stool near the bench. Not long, just enough to let your feet remember they have been carrying you since morning. The room around you is full of completed tasks, and the quiet feels earned. You can still hear the city, but it comes through walls as a softened fabric of sound. A bell in the distance, a closing door, wheels farther away, then the small inner sound of the candle. In the 1890s, Florence has many trades still breathing in side streets and back rooms. Bookbinders fold and press paper. Gilders lay gold so thin it trembles. Printers set type backwards so words may come forward. Bakers bank their ovens. Cobblers stitch by lamplight. And here, in your wax chandler's room, you prepare flame itself in measured lengths, quietly connected to all the other work that needs light to continue. You stand again before sleep can reach too far into your bones. There is always a final looking. The large molds, yes. The covered pan, yes. The scrap tins, sorted. The stove, safe. The wick, stored away from damp. The paper, closed in its drawer. You touch nothing unless it asks for correction. Looking is enough. A good closing is not a rush through gestures, but a slow agreement with the room. The air near the floor has cooled first. You feel it at your ankles. Higher up, the day's heat still lingers, carrying wax scent under the ceiling. When you move the curtain between workroom and shop, The cloth brushes your sleeve with a dry sound. The front room is dim, and the window reflects the candle back at you. So for a moment there seem to be two flames, one in the shop and one in the night. You open the door a little to look out. The street is not empty, but it has softened. A man passes with a basket. Someone across the way speaks from a doorway. The stones hold the last light in uneven patches. Florence after sunset is not silent, yet its sounds change shape, becoming less about trade and more about return. You feel the day loosen around you. You close the door and draw the bolt. The sound is firm, but not harsh. The shop belongs to itself now. You carry the candle back through the front room, shielding the flame with your hand though there is no wind. This is habit too. Flame is small and alive while it lasts, and your work has made you careful around small living motions. The shadow of your fingers crosses the wall in long wavering bars. Before snuffing the last light, you think briefly of the candles already gone from the shop. The housekeeper's bundle may be in a pantry cupboard by now. The clerk may set one beside his papers tonight. The woman in black may carry hers to a room where quiet is needed. None of these scenes belongs to you, and yet your hands have entered them. Not as presents, exactly, but as useful light. The altar candles still rest inside their molds. The votives cool in their little cups. Tomorrow, you will see whether the wax has behaved well overnight. There is something humble in that uncertainty. You have done what skill allows, and now the material completes its part in darkness. You let it. A chandler who cannot let wax rest will never make peaceful candles. You pinch the snuffer around the shop candle's flame. The light disappears into a small ribbon of smoke. For a moment, the wick glows red at the tip, then darkens. The smell changes immediately, warm and smoky, sharper than the wax itself. You wait until the thread is truly out. Then the room settles into the kind of dark that still remembers light, and your eyes slowly find the shapes of bench, shelf, and doorway. The next morning will bring the same work, though never exactly the same. The wax may be firmer if the night turns cool. A customer may ask for something unusual. The apprentice may spill less. The church assistant may come early. A batch may crack, or release cleanly, or teach you some small correction you thought you already knew. Repetition is not sameness. It is a path worn smooth by returning feet. For now you move by memory. Your hand finds the wall, then the latch, then the place where your coat hangs. The coat is rough wool, carrying the cooler smell of the outside. When you put it on, the shop scent rises once more from your sleeves and hands. Wax follows you, as flour follows a baker, as ink follows a printer, as smoke follows the keeper of a stove. You step into the evening, and lock the door behind you. The key turns with a familiar resistance. The street receives you without ceremony. Above the roofs, the sky has gone deep blue, and the first stars are faint above the city's lamps and windows. You walk slowly, because there is no reason to hurry now. Your body still moves with the rhythm of dipping frames and careful pouring. The stones underfoot are uneven, and you know many of them by feel. Florence is a city of surfaces, worn steps, cool church walls, rough plaster, smooth counters, iron rings, wooden shutters, river stone. After a day of wax, your fingers seem to remember texture more than sight. You pass a lit window and see a flame inside, perhaps one of yours, perhaps another chandler's. It does not matter. The small light is doing its work. You may stop for a simple meal, or you may go home to one already waiting. The bread will have a crust that sounds softly when broken. Soup may steam in a bowl. Wine may darken the bottom of a cup. Ordinary hunger feels good after the workshop, because it belongs to the same honest body that lifted molds and tied bundles all day. You sit, and your hands rest, palms down, as if cooling on the table. Even away from the shop, the trade remains near. Someone at another table complains of a smoking candle, and you know without looking that the wick is too long or the air too restless. A child holds a taper too near a draught, and you notice the flame lean. You do not correct everyone. That would be tiresome. You simply see what the work has taught you to see, then let the evening continue. The conversation around you, if there is conversation, moves in gentle fragments. Prices, weather, a cousin's letter, repairs to a roof, the rumor of a new electric installation somewhere grander than your street. Electricity is spoken of with wonder, irritation, hope, and suspicion, depending on who speaks. You listen without alarm. New light may come, but old light does not vanish in a single evening. There will still be rooms needing candles tomorrow. Gas has already taken many streets from darkness. Electric lamps may take more. Yet candles remain where wires do not reach, where flame is wanted for ceremony, where a person prefers the softness of living light beside a bed. Your trade may change, but change has always stood near the door of every workshop. The work answers by becoming more careful, more suited to what only it can offer. You finish the meal and return home through streets that smell of stone, cooking fires, damp cloth, and night air from the river. The city's great buildings rest in shadow. Their carved edges blur. Without daylight, Florence becomes less like a picture and more like a place of footsteps, doors, and small lamps. You are not thinking in grand thoughts. You are tired, and the tiredness is enough. At home, if you keep one of your own candles near the bedside, you notice its flaws first. This one may be slightly uneven. That one may come from scraps, useful rather than lovely. You light it anyway. The flame rises, and the room becomes yours in a small circle. A chair, a folded shirt, a basin, the edge of a blanket. Candlelight does not reveal everything. It gives enough, and enough can be kind. Your hands ache a little when you unlace your boots. The ache is in the thumb, the wrist, the forearm, familiar places shaped by repeated work. You flex your fingers and see faint pale traces near the nails. Wax is stubborn. It waits in small lines. You smile at it perhaps. Or perhaps you are too tired to smile. But either way, it is part of the day returning with you. Sleep comes differently to people who work with heat. At first, the body still feels the stove, even in a cooler room. Your face remembers warmth. Your palms remember the ladle. Your ears remember the drip of wax and the scrape of trimming. These memories do not trouble you. They arrange themselves in slow order, like candles on a shelf, and the mind walks past them without needing to stop. Before sleep, you may think of tomorrow's first task. The altar molds. You see them in the dark behind your eyes, lined along the bench, cooling around scented wicks. You imagine the soft release when the finished candles slide free. You imagine inspecting their surfaces in morning light. Then the thought loosens. Work can wait where you left it. The room has held it before, and when morning returns, pale and cool over Florence, the Wax Chandler's shop is still there, with its shutters closed, its tools in place, and its cooled molds waiting in the dim back room. You arrive before the street has fully gathered itself. The key is cold from the night. It turns in the lock with a small scrape that feels louder than it is. When the door opens, the shop breathes out yesterday's scent: wax, paper, wood, and a faint memory of smoke. You stand just inside, letting your eyes adjust. The room is grey before it is golden. The shelves are quiet. The work has waited. You open the shutters enough for the first light to enter. Dust rises in the pale beam, drifting without hurry. The air is cool, especially near the floor, and your breath feels clearer than it did at closing. You set down your bundle, hang your coat, and tie on the apron that still holds the shape of yesterday. It is stiff, where wax dried in the cloth. As it settles against you, the roll settles too. The first visit is to the molds. This is not impatience, it is care. You go to the back room and touch the metal with the back of your fingers. Cool now, ready. The altar candles have spent the night becoming themselves inside darkness, and now your hands will learn whether the day's work held true. You clear the bench, lay down a clean cloth, and take the first mold from the row. There is a way to release a candle that avoids force. You turn the mold gently, loosen the seal, and feel for movement. The metal gives a faint click. Then the candle slides, slow at first, then free into your waiting hand. It is smooth, pale, and heavy. The wick stands true at the center. You hold it in the morning light and let yourself take one quiet breath of satisfaction, no larger than the candle requires. The second releases cleanly too. The third resists. You do not fight it. You warm the mold slightly with your hands and a cloth, turn it again, and wait. Wax dislikes being bullied after cooling, just as it dislikes being hurried while warm. At last it loosens. This candle has a faint line near the base, not ruinous, but worth noting. You set it aside for closer inspection. By the fourth candle, the apprentice has arrived. He stops near the doorway, sensing that the releasing is delicate. You hand him the clean cloth and let him receive the next candle after you loosen it. His hands stiffen with worry. The candle slides out, and he nearly grips too hard. You murmur for him to hold it as he would hold a sleeping thing. He relaxes, and the candle rests safely across his palms. Morning in the Florence Wax Chandler's shop often begins with judgment, though judgment here is gentle and practical. You line the altar candles together and inspect them one by one. Surface, base, wick, weight, straightness. The faint line on the third candle remains visible, so it will not go with the church order. It can be remelted or sold for a less formal use, depending on how it behaves when trimmed. The others are sound. You trim the bases with the sharp knife, keeping the cuts level. The shavings are thicker than those from small tapers, falling in curved pieces that look like pale shell. You save them. The apprentice gathers them into the clean scrap dish. The smell of fresh-cut beeswax rises strongly, sweeter than the cooled surface, as if the candle keeps its deeper scent hidden until opened by the blade. The tops need attention too. You free the wick and trim it to a proper length, not too long, not too short. A church candle must light without fuss and begin steadily. You smooth a small roughness near the top with a warmed cloth. The wax yields, then firms, the mark fades. You turn the candle once more in the light. Good. The order will be ready when the assistant comes. After that, the day takes up its repeating shape. The stove is lit. Water warms beneath the pan. Wax waits in pieces, dull and solid, then begins to soften. You prepare new wicks while the heat gathers. The apprentice sweeps. Outside, Florence wakes through shutters, carts, bells, and footfalls. The same city, but not the same morning. Every day repeats the form and changes the contents. A baker from nearby comes in early, wanting rough candles for work before dawn. His sleeves smell of flour and warm crust. You know him well enough to choose without much talk. He wants function, not beauty. You give him candles that burn steadily and cost less, made from a practical blend that would not suit an altar, but suits an oven room well. He pays in coins dusty with flour, and the counter carries that dry scent after he leaves. You wipe the counter with a damp cloth, smiling faintly at the way trades leave marks on one another. Flour in the chandler's shop, wax in the baker's sleeve, perhaps, where he tucked the parcel under his arm, ink on the clerk's cuff, incense in the priest's assistant's wool. A city is not only streets and buildings, it is a slow exchange of dusts, scents, habits, and small useful objects moving from hand to hand. The wax melts by degrees. You stir it, and the solid pieces knock softly against the pan before dissolving into the larger warmth. This batch is for household candles, so you blend with care but not ceremony. Paraffin, stearin, and beeswax each have their character. Paraffin burns bright but can be troublesome if poorly made. Stearin hardens and improves shape. Beeswax brings scent and a steadier grace. You know their temperaments like neighbors. You do not use complicated words when explaining this to customers. You say one candle is harder, another cleaner, another finer. You say this one is good for a bedroom, that one for a kitchen, this one for prayer, that one for carrying along a passage. The trade contains science, but the shop speaks in ordinary needs. Will it smoke? Will it last? Will it stand straight? Will the room feel kinder with it lit? The apprentice prepares dipping frames, and today you let him tie a full row of wicks. His spacing is uneven at first. You have him untie half and begin again. He sighs, but softly. You show him that crowded wicks touch when the wax thickens, and touching spoils the shape. Too much space wastes the frame and tires the wrist. There is a middle distance, and the eye must learn it before the hand can keep it. He tries again. Better this time. You say so plainly, without making too much of it. Praise in a workshop should be useful, not sweet enough to distract. He lowers the frame into the wax under your watch. The first dip darkens the cotton, then coats it in a translucent skin. He lifts too quickly, and the drops run unevenly. You guide his wrist downward for the next pass, slowing the motion. This is how the Florence Wax Chandler's knowledge passes along, not in books, but in shared air beside a warm pan. You let him make mistakes that can be repaired. A thin first coat can be corrected. A crooked wick can be cut away. A burned batch cannot be unburned. And a pan of wax spilled near flame is a lesson no one needs. So you stand close when heat is involved, and farther away when only patience is at risk. He learns both the freedom and the boundary, though he may not know those words. The morning grows warmer. The smell of melting wax fills the room until it seems to soften the edges of thought. You move between tasks with the slow efficiency of long habit. Check the cooling frame. Stir the pan. Trim yesterday's votives. Wrap the altar candles. Answer the door. Return to the bench. A day in the shop is rarely one task at a time. It is many small ripenings watched together. The priest's assistant arrives before noon. He carries the same folded list, though now it is no longer needed. You bring out the wrapped altar candles and open one for inspection. The paper unfolds with a dry sound. The candle lies there, pale and smooth, smelling faintly of honey and clean cloth. He nods. You show him the votive trays too, counting them together so the number settles clearly between you. He asks whether the candles will be ready for the feast. You tell him they are ready now. There is comfort in saying this. Ready is one of the good words of any trade. It means the material has been persuaded, the tools have done their part, and the hands may release the work. He pays part, notes part to the church account, and thanks you in the formal way of church errands. You accept in the practical way of shopkeepers. The order leaves in a wooden crate lined with cloth. You and the apprentice carry it to the door together. The assistant lifts one handle, and a boy with him takes the other. The crate moves out into Florence, into the noise and light beyond the shop. You watch only until they turn the corner. Then your doorway is empty again, and the space where the order rested feels oddly large for a minute. But work fills space quickly. The dipping frames need another pass. You return to the pan. The apprentice lowers his row with better steadiness now, and you say nothing because silence lets him feel the improvement for himself. The candles emerge thicker than before, each one shining briefly. Drops fall in a soft scattered rhythm. Down, pause, up, hang. Down, pause, up, hang. The day resumes its old music. At midday, the light is bright enough that you partly close the shutters to protect the candles near the window. Too much sun can soften edges and make wrapped bundles sweat. The front room becomes striped with shade. The air changes from clear morning coolness to the close warmth of the working day. You feel it under the apron. You loosen your collar and drink from the cup kept on the back shelf. Food waits wrapped in cloth. Bread again, olives perhaps, a bit of cheese, something simple enough to eat between cooling times. You sit near the doorway to the courtyard, where the air moves faintly. The apprentice sits on an overturned crate. Neither of you speaks for a little while. Chewing, breathing, the distant city, the soft tick of cooling wax. These are enough. When you do speak, it is about Wick. Not because you are stern, but because the morning's lesson is still fresh. You tell him that a wick is not merely a string. It is the candle's road for flame. It must draw melted wax upwards steadily, neither too greedily nor too weakly. He looks at the cotton differently after that, turning a strand between his fingers as if it has become more than thread, and it has for him. That is how a trade opens. The ordinary object deepens. A mold is no longer a tube. A knife is no longer only a knife. Wax is not just wax, but temperature, origin, scent, hardness, patience, promise. The apprentice will not learn all of this today, but today gives him a door. You can almost see it open while he looks at the wick in his hand. After the meal, you return to stockwork. The shelves need more small candles for household use, the kind bought in pairs or bundles by people who count coins carefully. These candles must be dependable above all. You prepare molds that make several at once, smaller and plainer than the church molds. The metal is worn, but clean. Each cavity receives its wick, each wick is checked. Each check is a small act of respect for the unknown buyer. The pour is quicker than for altar candles, but not careless. You fill each mold in sequence, moving the ladle smoothly from one opening to the next. The wax level rises, catches light, and stills. A little steam of warmth lifts into your face. The smell is less sweet than pure beeswax, but still pleasant, with a faint mineral note from the harder blend. You set the mold aside and begin another. A child peers through the shop door, not entering, just watching. Children often like candle shops. Perhaps it is the smell, or the pale rose, or the thought that light can be made and stacked on shelves. You glance up and give a small nod. The child vanishes, then returns with a woman who needs a few inexpensive candles and a twist of wick for home repair. You sell both, measuring the wick from the reel with your thumb along the rule. She asks whether old candle ends can be melted together. You tell her yes, if they are clean, and if she keeps the heat gentle. You warn her not to place wax directly over fierce flame. Your voice stays calm, but clear enough that the advice lands. Many households save ends, and many small domestic economies depend on such saving. The shop knows thrift not as meanness, but as a way of honoring materials. When she leaves, the apprentice asks whether people making their own candles harms business. You shake your head. People have always saved ends. They still come when they need something better, straighter, cleaner, or simply ready. A chandler does not exist because no one else can melt wax. A chandler exists because doing it well, repeatedly, for many uses is a craft with memory in it. The afternoon lengthens, and the Florence Wax Chandler's bench gathers its familiar mixture of new work, cooling work, and work waiting for judgment. You inspect the household molds poured after lunch. Some are ready to release, others still hold warmth. You begin with the smaller ones. They come free, with little resistance, plain candles sliding into your palm, each one modest and useful. You trim, sort, and set them aside. A few have slight surface marks, not enough to reject. These will be sold for kitchen or workroom use. Beauty is welcome, but usefulness has its own honest face. The apprentice has grown tired again. You see it in the way his shoulders rise toward his ears, and the way he forgets to place the scraper back in its proper spot. You give him a simpler task, coiling string and checking paper sheets for tiers. There is no virtue in asking exhausted hands to do delicate work. A good workshop knows when attention has thinned. It shifts the work accordingly. You return to smoothing the dipped tapers. They have built enough layers now to be shaped. You warm the rolling board slightly, then lay 2 candles at a time beneath your palms. The board presses them into straighter lines, and the wax responds with a muted whisper. You feel each uneven place as it passes under your hand. The pressure is not heavy. It is guidance more than force. There are older ways of candle making still remembered in stories, some with rushes dipped in fat, some with tallow that smoked and smelled strongly, some with grand houses ordering fine beeswax while poorer rooms made do with what they could. Your Florence shop stands somewhere along that long road. By the 1890s, materials have changed, trade has widened, and lamps have multiplied. Yet the hand still lowers wick into wax, and the flame still asks for the same basic kindness. You think of tallow only briefly, mostly when a customer mentions old smells from childhood. Animal fat candles were useful, but they carried odors and softened in heat. Beeswax was cleaner, dearer, and long connected with churches and wealthier homes. Stearin and paraffin brought new possibilities, making candles cheaper and harder. These facts are not dry to you. They live in the different blocks on your shelf, each one with a use and a temperament. The shop's back wall is stained from many seasons of warmth. Near the stove, the plaster has darkened. Above the bench, faint scratches mark where frames have leaned. A nail holds a loop of string. Another holds a brush. These marks are the room's handwriting. You have added some, inherited others, and stopped noticing many until evening light reveals them again. A workshop does not decorate itself. It accumulates evidence. A man from a nearby lodging house arrives with an empty crate. He needs a regular supply, not fine, not poor, just steady candles for rooms let by the week. You know this order. It must be economical and reliable, because lodgers blame the house when candles smoke or fail. You count bundles into the crate, noting the number in your head before it reaches the ledger. The crate smells of pine, dust, and old straw. He talks while you work, telling you about a guest who read until dawn and complained of darkness after using 3 candles too quickly. You trim the wick of the shop candle and show him the difference again, as you showed the clerk. He laughs softly and says, "Guests do not listen." You say candles do if treated properly. It is almost a joke, but too gentle to disturb the room. After he leaves, the stock shelf looks thin. That is good and troublesome at once. Sold candles mean money and trust. Empty spaces mean more work before tomorrow. You stand with your hands at your sides, measuring the shelf by sight. Then you return to the pan and prepare another modest batch. There is no drama in being needed. There is only the next frame, the next wick, the next careful heat. Late afternoon brings a softer kind of fatigue. It is not the heaviness of morning effort, but the slow blurring that comes after many small decisions. You counter it by returning to the senses. Smell the wax, feel the wick, listen to the simmering water, watch the surface. The body can carry you when the mind grows misty, provided the habits are good. That is why habits are made carefully. The apprentice hums without noticing. It is a small tune, no more than a line repeated under his breath. You let it stay. The shop can hold a little music when it is that quiet. His hands fold paper while the tune rises and falls. Outside, a vendor calls from farther down the street, the words stretched by distance until they become almost melody too. The city and the shop answer each other in softened sounds. When the sun lowers enough to touch the upper shelf, you move the pale beeswax candles away from the direct light. Their surfaces are firm, but you prefer caution. The candles feel cool when lifted, dense and smooth. You place them in a shaded box, separated by cloth. The cloth has been washed many times and still smells faintly of wax. Some scents never leave. They simply become part of the material. You mark the lodging house order in the ledger before memory has to carry it too long. The ink flows unevenly, and you clean the nib. Small irritations are easier when addressed at once. A scratchy pen can spoil a figure. A spoiled figure can confuse an account, and a confused account can sour a week. So you pause, clean the nib, test it on scrap paper, and continue. The Florence Wax Chandler's work is full of these small preventions. Keep dust from wax. Keep wick from damp. Keep paper from sun. Keep flame from cloth. Keep accounts before forgetting. None of it sounds remarkable, and perhaps that is why it matters. Much of a peaceful life is made by tending small edges before they become sharp enough to cut into the day. As the evening approaches again, you prepare deliveries that can be carried before the shop closes. The lodging house crate waits near the door. A smaller parcel is set aside for a woman who will send a servant. The church order is gone, leaving only a note in the ledger and a faint rectangle of clean space where the crate rested. You sweep that space, because clean emptiness is also part of order. The apprentice is sent with the lodging house crate on a handcart. You remind him to keep it level. He nods, proud to be trusted beyond the doorway. The cart wheels bump over the threshold, then rattle into the street. You stand watching until he steadies the load after the first stones. Then he is part of the city's motion, carrying your candles into rooms you will likely never see. While he is gone, the shop becomes very quiet. You take advantage of the stillness to prepare fine wicks for a later order. These are thinner, meant for slender beeswax tapers that must burn with a delicate flame. You run the cotton through your fingers, feeling for uneven places. The thread is soft but strong. It leaves a faint dryness on your skin. You cut each length and lay it straight, one beside the next. A breeze enters under the door and bends the shop candle. You notice at once. The flame leans, then recovers. Drafts are invisible until flame reveals them. You move a paper parcel farther from the edge of the counter and check the latch. It is not fear, only practice. Fire is useful when respected, and ruinous when ignored. A chandler knows both truths, and keeps them quietly in the same pocket. The apprentice returns, flushed from the errand, pleased that the lodging-house man signed the slip. He hands it over carefully. The paper smells of the street, dustier than when it left. You place it in the ledger and let him drink water. His account of the errand comes in more words than the errand needs. But you listen. Today, carrying a crate 4 streets away has made him feel like part of the trade. That feeling matters. Work is not only skill. It is belonging to a chain of need and answer. Someone needs light. Someone prepares it. Someone carries it. Someone burns it. The chain is humble, but it holds. You let the apprentice have his pride, because tomorrow the floor will need sweeping again, and pride must learn to live beside repetition without growing sour. The final batch of the day is small. You dip it mostly to keep the shelf from looking bare. The wax has a darker tone now from the blend, cream rather than pale gold. You lower the frame, lift, and hang. The apprentice watches the drops fall. He says they sound like rain, though outside the evening is dry. You listen, and find he is not wrong. Tiny warm rain, falling back into the tray from candles not yet finished. The light fades in layers. First the far corners dull, then the shelves lose their separate lines. Then the window becomes a mirror. You light another candle before the first one fails, carrying flame from wick to wick. This passing of light is one of the simplest things in the shop, and one of the oldest. Flame touches cotton. Cotton catches. Wax begins to feed it. A small beginning, repeated across centuries. Now the room holds 2 flames for a moment. You snuff the shorter one, and let the newer candle take over. Its light is steadier, taller. It shows the apprentice's tired face, the wax on the bench, the stacked parcels, the pan cooling under its lid. You feel the day nearing its inward turn again. Customers may still come, but the shop has begun to gather itself toward closing. A final visitor steps in just before you lower the shutter. It is a seamstress from a nearby lane, needing one good candle for close work after supper. Her eyes are tired, and she asks for a flame that will not flicker badly. You choose a candle with a well-scented wick and a firm body. You tell her to keep it away from the window draught. She nods, understanding at once, because her own work also depends on steadiness. She pays with small coins counted carefully. You wrap the candle in plain paper, then add a second scrap around the tip, so it will not bruise in her basket. Her fingers are pricked in several places from needles. Your own fingers are marked by wax and heat. For a brief moment, two trades meet across the counter, both made of patience, repetition, and eyes trained to notice what others miss. When she leaves, the bell above the door gives its thin sound. You listen until it stops. Then you draw the shutter lower, not fully closed yet, but enough that the street becomes a narrow band beneath it. The Florence Wax Chandler's shop enters its evening state once more, not asleep, not open in the same way, but turned inward toward cleaning, counting, and the careful protection of tomorrow's work. You begin with the dipped batch, moving it to a place where it can cool undisturbed. The candles are still too soft for shaping. Their surfaces shine when the candlelight touches them. You leave space between them so they will not kiss and mark each other. The frame hangs from its hook, swaying once, then stilling. A drop falls late, after you have turned away, and you hear it land. The sound draws you back, and you smile faintly at your own attention. A whole day in the shop makes the ear responsive to tiny things. Wax falling, wick catching, paper tearing, a mold releasing, a flame beginning to smoke. These sounds would vanish in a market or station, but here they carry meaning. The quiet does not mean nothing is happening. It means the happening is small enough to require care. You cover the pan, you wipe the rim, you collect the clean scraps and close their tin. The apprentice sweeps with less prompting now, moving slowly but thoroughly. Dust and wax crumbs gather into a pale little ridge before the broom. He bends to pick out a usable piece, then glances at you to see whether he chose correctly. You nod. His face softens with relief, then returns to concentration. The ledger waits, and you fill it while the shop is still warm. Lodging house order, seamstress candle, morning baker, church payment noted, household bundles sold. The columns are not large, but they are steady. Your pen moves through them with the same practical calm as your hand through wax. At the bottom, you leave a note to order more wick before the supply runs low. A good note is a favor to your future self. Outside, the street is thinned. You hear fewer carts now, more footsteps. Voices pass in pairs. Somewhere nearby, a door shuts with the heavy sound of wood meeting stone. The shop candle burns beside the ledger, its light making the ink shine before it dries. You sand the page lightly, then close the book when the ink is safe. The cover feels worn and slightly rough beneath your palm. You send the apprentice home with instructions for morning. He repeats them, not perfectly, but well enough. Check the dipped batch before touching. Sweep before the pan is uncovered. Bring water. He takes his cap from the peg and leaves with the careful tiredness of someone who wants to prove he can be trusted. The door closes behind him, and the bell gives one last, very small sound. Alone again, you make the final round. This round is almost the same every evening, and that sameness is what lets your mind grow quiet while your hands remain useful. Stove, pan, molds, scraps, wick, paper, ledger, shutters, door. You do not rush through the list. Each thing receives your glance. Each thing answers by being where it should be, or by asking for one last correction. A wrapping cloth has been left too near the stove. You move it to the shelf. A wick reel sits uncovered. You place it in its box against damp and dust. One parcel leans against another in a way that may dent the candles if left overnight. You straighten it. These are small things, but the morning will be easier because of them. Work done at night can become kindness at dawn. The candle light makes the cooling wax look almost alive. It glows softly at the edges and dulls at the center. You know it is only the surface catching flame, yet the sight still pleases you. Wax is a substance between worlds, solid and liquid, field and flame, labor and rest. In your hands it becomes something people can use when darkness comes close. That is enough mystery for one trade. You stand by the bench, listening. The city outside continues, but farther away now. Inside, a cooling mold ticks once, a tiny sound from changing metal. The stove gives a last breath. Your own breathing slows with the room. The smell of wax is everywhere, in the wood, the cloth, the walls, and your sleeves. If someone entered blindfolded, they would know the trade by scent alone. You think of the seamstress lighting her candle later, perhaps setting it beside a basket of mending. You think of the baker placing his rough candles near the oven room before dawn. You think of the altar candles traveling toward their feast day, still wrapped, still holding their first flame in reserve. These thoughts move gently, without claiming too much. You made the candles. Their burning belongs to others. The last task is to prepare tomorrow's first wax. You set aside the measured pieces near the covered pan, enough for the morning's household batch. Not in the pan yet, just ready. The pieces sit dull and pale in a bowl, hard-edged now, though by morning they will soften under heat and join one another. Preparation is a quiet promise. It says the next day may begin without searching. You wash, dry your hands and feel the skin pulse slightly where heat has worked on it. A little beeswax remains near one thumb. You rub it, and the scent rises fresh again, as though the whole day has been stored in that small trace. The candle on the bench flickers once when you pass. You shield it instinctively. Then you take up the snuffer, but you do not close it yet. For a moment you let the light remain. It rests on the tools in their places, on the clean molds, on the hanging frame, on the paper drawer and the cooling batch. The workshop is not grand, but it is complete in the way a well-used room can be complete. Everything here has a reason. Everything has been touched by work. Everything will be touched again. The flame lowers as the wick curls inward. You trim it once, even though the candle will soon be snuffed, because habit continues until the end. The small cut falls away, and the flame clears. That little improvement, made for only a few minutes of better burning, feels entirely natural to you. A chandler does not ask whether a flame has long left before tending it. A flame is tended while it is present. Then you put the snuffer over it, and the room folds into darkness with the faint warm smell of smoke. The darkness holds the shape of the room for a moment after the flame is gone. You know where the bench stands, where the molds cool, where the door waits, and you move through the shop by memory rather than sight. Outside, Florence keeps its evening sounds close to the stone. Footsteps passing, a voice lifting, a shutter drawn in its frame. You lock the door and step away with the wax scent still on your hands, while the workshop behind you keeps its quiet heat a little longer. By morning, the room has cooled completely, and the first touch of the key feels like the start of a familiar song. The Florence Wax Chandler's shop receives you with still air and faint sweetness. Yesterday's dipped candles hang in their frame, firm enough now for handling. The surface has gone from glossy to soft satin, and when you lift the frame down, the candles move as one pale row, each with its own slight curve and weight. You set them on the rolling board and begin the slow correction. Your palms travel along the wax with even pressure, feeling where each taper leans or thickens. The board is smooth from use but not polished, and it gives just enough hold to guide the candle without bruising it. Outside, a cartwheel knocks over a loose stone. Inside, the wax answers only to your hands, and the morning finds its patient rhythm again. The apprentice arrives with water and a yawn he tries to hide. You let him set the pail down before giving instructions. He is to trim yesterday's small household candles while you finish shaping the dipped batch. His knife hand is better now, though still cautious. You show him again how the blade should meet the base, almost flat, taking only what is needed. A candle does not become better because more is cut away. You work side by side for a while. The room fills with the soft sounds of trimming, rolling, setting down, and sweeping shavings into a dish. Fresh cut wax smells brighter than cooled wax, and the scent rises each time the knife opens a new surface. The apprentice sniffs once, without meaning to. You notice, and say that the nose is also a tool. He looks at you as if deciding whether this is wisdom or ordinary speech, and the work continues while he decides. This morning's order is for a convent not far from the river. Small beeswax tapers used in a side chapel, and ordinary candles for the kitchen rooms. You lay out the better wax first. It has a clean pale color, with the faint yellow warmth of honey left somewhere deep inside it. The kitchen candles can be made from a sturdier blend, less costly and harder in the hand. You keep the materials separate on the bench, because each belongs to a different kind of light. In 1890s Florence, a wax chandler still understands the city through these distinctions. A chapel asks for one candle, a stairwell another, a bedroom another, and a workroom another still. The flame may look simple once lit, but its making has already answered many quiet questions. How long must it burn? How steady must it stand? How much smoke may a room tolerate? How much can the buyer spend without worry? You begin with the chapel tapers. The wicks are fine and even, cut from cotton cord that has been kept dry in its box. Damp wick is trouble waiting politely for a flame. You stretch each length between your fingers and fasten it to the frame. The cotton has a faint dry squeak when drawn through your hand. It is a small sound, but in the workshop, small sounds are never quite lost. The wax warms in the pan, and you skim it with a shallow spoon. A few specks gather at the edge. You remove them, wipe the spoon, and watch the surface settle. The pan is not directly over the fiercest heat. Water beneath it carries warmth gently, keeping the wax from scorching. The stove ticks and breathes. Your face feels the heat first, then your wrists, then the room itself begins to soften around the work. You lower the wicks. The first dip is nearly invisible, but you know it is there. The threads darken, stiffen, and come up with the beginning of a candle clinging to them. You hang the frame and wait. The apprentice glances at the row, then at you, as if still surprised that so little becomes something through simple return. You let him see the waiting. It may be the hardest part to teach. While the tapers cool, you turn to the kitchen candles for the convent. These will be molded, shorter and plainer, meant for early cooking, storage rooms, and practical hands. The molds are squat and well used, their edges nicked from years of service. You clean them with a cloth warmed near the stove, feeling inside each cavity for old ridges. A rough inside makes a rough candle, and roughness catches more than the eye. The convent's kitchen candles will never be admired in a chapel, but you make them carefully. Someone will carry one before dawn, to find a pot, a broom, a sack of flour, or the way across a cold floor. Ordinary light deserves ordinary faithfulness. You center each wick, pull it taut, and secure it. The metal molds stand ready, dark mouths open, while the wax for them grows clear in its own pan. A customer comes in as you pour. You hear the bell and hold your hand steady until the mold is filled. Then you set the ladle down and step into the shop. It is a man from a printing room, his sleeves marked with ink, wanting narrow candles that fit holders near the type cases. You know the kind. They must not smoke too much, because soot darkens already close work. They must burn steadily beside paper. You bring him a bundle from the shelf and ask whether the room is draughty. He shrugs, then admits the door opens often. You choose a slightly thicker wick and harder wax, explaining that it will stand better against the moving air. He listens with the weary attention of someone who has watched many small things go wrong during long work. Ink and wax meet on the counter as he counts his coins. and the smell of the printing room follows him out. Back in the workroom, the poured kitchen candles are settling. Tiny hollows form near the wicks. You top them up while the wax is still warm enough to join itself cleanly. The apprentice has remembered to turn the dipping frame without being told. This pleases you more than a grand gesture would. He is beginning to watch the work rather than wait for instructions. That is how a shop gains another pair of useful eyes. As the morning wears on, the Florence Wax Chandler's routine shifts from first making into the steady tending of many small beginnings. The chapel tapers receive their second and third dips. Each pass thickens them by a little, and the frame becomes heavier in your hand. The motion asks for patience in the shoulder, not just the wrist. Down, pause, up, hang. You do not count aloud. Your body counts by weight, by sight, by the way the wax hangs from the lower tips before falling. This is not guesswork, though it may look like calm guessing to someone at the doorway. You check the temperature often. A small thermometer might be found in some workshops, but much is still read by eye and hand. Wax too cool gathers in lumps. Wax too hot runs thin and delays the building. The right heat gives a smooth coat that clings evenly and cools without harsh ridges. You stir, wait, and dip again. The room smells sweeter now, and the apprentice's hair catches a faint wax scent when he bends near the frame. There is a slow companionship in repeated work. You and the apprentice are not talking much, but you are sharing the same pace. He trims, you dip. He sweeps, you pour. He checks the molds, you wrap finished stock. The clock on the shelf ticks above you both, indifferent but useful. Somewhere beyond the shop, church bells cross each other in the air, one nearer, one farther, their sounds entering the room like pale cloth. A woman from the convent arrives near midday, not a nun herself but a lay helper who carries orders and parcels. She wears a dark shawl and has practical hands. You show her the chapel tapers in progress and the kitchen candles cooling. She does not hurry you. People who work in kitchens and chapels often understand waiting better than people who only pass through rooms. She asks whether they will be ready by late afternoon, and you say yes. She leaves with a small packet already prepared from yesterday's stock, a few candles needed at once. The rest will follow. Her departure brings a cooler draft under the door, carrying the smell of the street. Damp stone, horse, bread, and something green from a vegetable cart. You stand for one breath in that mingled air before returning to the warmer back room. The shop is always breathing between outside and inside. You take your midday meal in pieces, between dips. Bread first, while the tapers cool. A bit of cheese after the molds are topped. Water when the stove heat thickens the air. The apprentice eats standing until you point at the crate. He sits, chewing with the solemn hunger of youth. The wax does not care whether you are hungry. It continues cooling, and so you learn to arrange your own needs around the material's slow changes. The kitchen candles release after the meal. They are plain, slightly cream-colored, and sturdy in the hand. You trim their bases and set them upright in rows. They look almost like little columns from some very humble building. The apprentice notices one with a wick off center. You ask what he thinks will happen. He says it may burn down one side. You nod and set it aside. Not all lessons require correction from you. The chapel tapers are nearing their proper thickness. You test one by touch, then by sight against another from the row. Matching matters more in chapel sets than in kitchen bundles. A row of uneven tapers distracts the eye. You want them to stand together without calling attention to themselves. Their purpose is to give light, not to become the subject of it. So you dip the thinner ones once more and leave the others hanging. This kind of adjustment is quiet and constant. A frame may hold 12 wicks, but each candle grows slightly differently. One catches more wax at the tip. One cools faster near a draft. One leans toward its neighbor. You correct these small differences without irritation. The world has never made a perfect row without someone helping it along. Your hands provide that help. patiently, and without ceremony. Afternoon enters through the shutters with a warmer color. You wrap the kitchen candles in bundles of 6, then in larger paper for the convent order. The paper is plain and strong, suited to practical use. You tie each bundle with string and mark it lightly. The sound of string tightening around paper is one of the shop's cleanest sounds. It says the making has become ready for carrying. The chapel tapers receive their final smoothing. You roll them gently and trim the lower tips where wax has gathered. The trimmings fall into your palm, soft at first, then firming as they cool. Each taper is checked against the others. You do not demand false perfection, only a calm likeness. They should look like they belong to the same thought. When they do, you wrap them separately, using softer paper and a careful hand. The lay helper returns as the light begins to slant. You bring the parcels to the counter and unwrap one chapel taper for her to see. She lifts it with respect, turning it once. The scent of beeswax rises between you. She smiles, not broadly, but enough to show the order has met its purpose. Payment is counted, part in coins and part noted. You write it down while she gathers the parcels into her basket. When she leaves, the apprentice watches the basket disappear into the street. He says there will be a lot of your candles in that convent tonight. You answer that they will be the convent's candles once they cross the threshold. This is not modesty, exactly. It is the proper order of things. The chandler makes, the buyer uses, and the flame belongs to the room where it burns. Evening comes with a smell of cooling wax and paper dust. You clean the chapel pan more carefully than the household pan, because beeswax kept pure must remain pure. The cloth pulls warm residue from the metal. You fold the cloth, wipe again, and scrape the edge. The apprentice sweeps under the bench. His broom whispers over stone, gathering the day's small leavings into one place. By the following morning, a different task waits, and the Florence Wax Chandler turns from making candles to preparing wax that has not yet found its final form. The raw wax delivered earlier in the week rests in cloth-wrapped cakes on the lower shelf. Some are pale and clean, ready for finer work. Others are darker, with the greenish-brown tint of wax that still carries more of the hive inside it. Today you will refine part of it, not in the grand manner of large factories, but in the small shop way, by melting, straining, settling, and repeating until the material is fit for its purpose. You unwrap one cake and set it on the bench. It is firm under the knife, but not brittle. When you cut into it, the blade releases a richer smell than finished candles carry. Honey, propolis, warm wood, and something faintly earthy. This wax remembers comb and hive more clearly than the pale blocks. You cut it into pieces so it will melt evenly, each chunk falling with a dull sound into the pan. The apprentice leans close, and you let him smell the difference. His eyes widen slightly. Clean beeswax is sweet, but rawer wax is deeper, almost like a cupboard where summer has been stored with herbs and old wood. You tell him that not every smell is a flaw. Some are simply signs of where the wax has been. The question is, what the candle needs to become. You heat the wax slowly over water. As it softens, darker flecks drift through the golden liquid. Bits of hive, dust, and old comb rise or sink according to their nature. You do not hurry them. Some impurities can be skimmed from the top. Others must be caught in cloth. Others settle at the bottom if given time. Refining wax is a lesson in letting each unwanted thing reveal where it belongs. A cloth is stretched over a clean vessel and tied firmly. You pour the melted wax through it in a controlled stream. The cloth darkens as it catches particles. Warm scent rises strongly, filling the room with a hive-like richness that differs from ordinary candle making. The apprentice holds the vessel steady, both hands tight around the handles. You remind him to breathe. He does, and the stream continues. The strained wax is clearer, but not finished. You let it settle, then pour again, leaving the darker sediment behind. Each pass improves it a little. You hold a cooled sample near the window and judge its color. It will not be the palest wax, but it will make good household beeswax candles. warm-toned and fragrant. Not every candle must be white. Some carry a golden color that suits domestic rooms beautifully. In Florence, pale candles may be preferred for altars and formal settings, but warm yellow candles have their own comfort. They seem to hold daylight even before being lit. You imagine them on a wooden table, near a bowl of soup, or beside someone mending linen in a quiet room. The color is not a defect. It is a different kind of welcome. You set this batch aside for such use. The refining leaves behind darker residue. Some of it may be pressed again or used in rougher mixtures, depending on its condition. Some must be discarded. You handle even waste thoughtfully. There is no romance in dirt, but there is discipline in knowing what can return and what must not. A careless chandler spoils good material by trying to save every scrap. A careful one knows the difference between thrift and confusion. The morning is taken almost entirely by wax preparation. Customers come and go, but you return each time to the settling vessels, checking how the surface clears. The room is warmer than usual, and the scent heavier. It clings to the curtains and to your shirt. Your fingers grow slick, and you wipe them often. The apprentice carries cloths to the courtyard and hangs them where air can pass through, their stiffened folds catching light. A small boy brings a message from a church sacristan asking about candles for a procession later in the month. The date is not soon, but procession candles require planning. They must be long enough to last, sturdy enough to carry, and shaped so wax does not run too freely onto hands. You write the request in the ledger and make a note to prepare samples. The boy waits for a reply, looking at the melting pans with open curiosity. You give him the folded note and a warning not to touch the pans. He nods gravely, as children do when fire is mentioned, then forgets gravity as soon as he reaches the door. His footsteps scatter into the street. You return to the bench, smiling faintly. Candle shops draw children because they sense, perhaps better than adults, that something ordinary and magical sits side by side in the work. By midday, the refined wax has cooled into shallow cakes. You lift one from its vessel and turn it in your hands. It is smooth on top, slightly rough beneath where sediment settled away. The underside is trimmed clean. You cut the cake and examine the interior. The color is even enough. The smell is good. You mark it for warm household tapers and set it apart from the finer altar stock. The apprentice asks why the best wax is not always used for every candle. You ask him whether he would wear festival shoes to sweep a stove room. He grins, understanding before answering. Materials have proper uses. To spend the finest wax where a rougher candle would serve is not generosity, but confusion. To use poor wax where steadiness and cleanliness are needed is worse. Judgment lies in matching material to purpose. The afternoon is for wick work. This may be one of the sleepiest parts of the chandler's trade, if a person only watches from the doorway. But to your hands it is full of small information. Cotton arrives in reels and bundles, and each must be inspected. You look for even twist, dryness, strength, and cleanliness. The wick determines how the candle breathes flame. A poor wick can spoil the finest wax. You set out lengths for several types of candles: fine chapel tapers, household candles, thick processional samples. Each wick is cut longer than the finished candle, because tying, dipping, and trimming all take their share. The scissors make a repeated sound, clean and small. Snip, lay aside, draw more cotton, snip, lay aside. The apprentice keeps count, moving a wooden bead along the bench for each completed group. The room cools slightly because the main stove has been lowered after refining. That cooler air makes wickwork pleasant. You can smell cotton now, dry and faint, beneath the lingering beeswax. The fibers catch against rough places in your skin. You rub one length between finger and thumb, then reject it for uneven twist. The apprentice looks at it, trying to see what you felt. You place it in his hand and let him compare. He feels the difference after a moment. You can tell by his expression. It is not a dramatic discovery, only a small inward click. Good. Many trades are made from such clicks, each one too small to announce, each one changing the hand forever. Tomorrow he may forget, then remember. In a month he may feel it without thinking. In a year he may reject a poor wick before his mind catches up. Late in the afternoon, the procession samples begin. These candles must be made to carry, not simply stand. You choose a firm wax blend with enough beeswax for a clean flame and enough hardness to resist bending in warm hands. The wicks are stronger than usual. You prepare a small frame and dip slowly, building the candles thicker than tapers but not as heavy as altar candles. Their purpose lies between movement and steadiness. Procession candles carry light through air that may shift, past bodies, along streets, under open sky. You do not think of this with drama. You think of hands holding them, sleeves near them, wax softening if the evening is warm. A good processional candle should burn without too much dripping, though no carried flame is entirely tidy. You shape the lower portion carefully, because that is where a hand or holder may meet it. The apprentice asks whether you have walked in such processions. You say yes, sometimes, though when you watch candles in a crowd, you notice different things from other people. You see which flames lean in the wind, which wicks smoke, which candles were made too soft. He laughs a little, imagining you unable to stop working even while standing in the street. You accept the laughter. It is not wrong. As the samples grow, you mark each batch by a small difference in wick and blend. Later, you will burn them and observe. Candle testing is quiet work, but it matters. You set a sample in a holder and light it near the back, away from drafts. The flame rises cleanly. You watch how the wax pool forms, whether the edge holds, whether the wick bends properly into the flame. The candle tells you its character by burning. Testing requires time. You cannot know a candle in its first minute. A bad wick may seem good at first. A too soft blend may behave until the body warms. A candle that looks fine on the shelf may reveal its weakness only when flame begins its slow descent. So you let it burn while other work continues, returning to inspect it at intervals. The apprentice is told to look without poking at it. He does well for a while, then leans too close. You remind him that breath is also a draft. He steps back. The flame steadies again. Such lessons are mildly embarrassing, which helps them stay. You have made your own, long ago. Every experienced hand carries a private collection of small foolishnesses survived and remembered. They soften your correction of others, if you let them. Evening approaches, and the test candle has burned down enough to speak clearly. The wax pool is even. The wick curls at the tip and consumes itself reasonably well. Dripping is modest. You mark the sample as promising, then blow it out gently, and note how much smoke follows. The smell is warm, with a slight sharper edge from the blend. Acceptable, perhaps one adjustment, a little more hardness, depending on the sacristan's preference. The day closes with notes rather than finished orders. You write the wick sizes, wax blends, and burning behavior in the ledger's back pages. These pages are less tidy than the accounts, filled with observations only another chandler might fully value. Too soft near hand, good flame in still air. Try tighter wick, pale wax reserved. The pen scratches, and the words settle into the shop's memory. The apprentice sweeps while you write. The broom makes a slow circle around the testing area, careful not to disturb the cooling sample. He has learned that a candle just blown out still holds heat and softness. The top can be marked by careless touch. The wick can break if handled too soon. Even after flame is gone, the candle remains in a brief state of change. You let him observe that, because endings also require care. When the shop is closed, the smell of the extinguished test candle lingers. It is smokier than the day's general sweetness, and it hangs near the ceiling before thinning. You cover the samples and set tomorrow's raw materials aside. Wick, warm-toned wax, a harder block for blending, and clean paper. Then you lower the lamp of the shop into darkness, leaving the night to finish cooling what the day began. The next day begins with rain. soft over Florence, tapping against shutters and darkening the stones outside the shop. Rain changes a chandler's room. The air feels thicker. Wicks must be guarded from damp. Paper curls at the edges if left too near the doorway. Customers enter with wet hems, bringing the smell of wool, leather and street water. You open the shop carefully, not too wide, and keep the wick box closed when not in use. The stove's warmth is welcome, but you do not let steam and dampness settle into cotton. The rain also brings people who remember they need candles. A grey day makes rooms hungry for light before evening. Early customers ask for small bundles, practical and inexpensive. You wrap each one in paper, then another outer fold if the person must carry it far. Wet paper tears, and wet candles disappoint everyone. Your hands move with extra care, feeling the damp in the air and adjusting without fuss. In the back room, the apprentice checks the wick supply and finds one reel not properly covered. The outer layer feels damp. His face tightens before he tells you. You take it, feel it, and set it aside to dry slowly away from direct heat. You do not scold at once. The damp wick is lesson enough. Later, you explain that heat too close may damage the fibers or make them uneven. Patience repairs more than haste. The Florence Wax Chandler's shop on a rainy morning becomes a place of guarded dryness. Cloths hang farther from the door. Paper stays in drawers. Finished candles are kept wrapped until needed. The stove is watched not only for wax, but for the room itself. You feel the air with your skin. A good workshop is almost a weather instrument, and your body has become part of it. A woman comes in asking for candles for a wake. Her umbrella drips near the threshold, and she apologizes softly. You bring a mat forward with your foot and tell her it is no trouble. Her face carries the dull stillness of someone who has not slept well. You choose clean-burning candles, not too costly, with a calm flame and decent length. She asks for enough to last through the night. You count them slowly and wrap them well against the rain. There are times when selling feels very close to serving. You do not speak more than necessary. The paper folds under your hands, the string tightens, and the parcel becomes something she can carry. When she leaves, the shop seems quieter than before. Rain continues at the shutter, small and steady, like fingers tapping the edge of the day. The apprentice has heard enough to understand without asking. He works silently, trimming small candles with unusual care. You let the silence remain. A chandler's candles enter many human hours, and not all of them are bright in the cheerful sense. Yet the work stays gentle. A steady flame beside grief is still a kindness. The candle cannot change sorrow, but it can make the room less harsh while sorrow sits there. By midday, the rain eases, but does not stop. The street outside shines in broken patches. Cartwheels hiss through shallow water. People step around puddles, lifting hems and trouser cuffs. Inside, you light a sample candle to test yesterday's adjusted processional blend, because the damp air gives useful information. If a candle smokes badly today, it may trouble an outdoor procession in mist or evening humidity. The flame catches slowly, then steadies. You watch the wick draw wax upward, the pool forming at the center, the edge holding firm. The apprentice records the time in words, not numerals, because the ledger's habit is spoken and old-fashioned. You smile at his careful spelling. The candle burns clean enough, though the flame leans when the door opens. You note the behavior and shield it with a small screen for the rest of the test. The screen is a simple thing, metal and darkened, used to protect a test flame from drafts without smothering it. You place it near, leaving air enough to feed the burn. Candle testing is a conversation with conditions. Still air tells one truth, damp air tells another, moving air tells another. No candle can be perfect everywhere, but a good one should fail gently, not suddenly. A man arrives from the sacristan with questions about the procession order. You show him the samples. and explain in ordinary language. This blend is firmer. This wick burns cleaner. This one drips less but costs a little more. He listens with his hat in his hands, rain beads on the brim. You light 2 short sample ends so he can see the difference. The flames stand near each other like 2 small opinions. He chooses the cleaner burn, accepting the slightly higher cost after some thought. The procession will need many candles, and the order will keep you busy. You write it in the ledger, taking care with the date and quantity, all in words. The apprentice watches the page as if the order itself has weight. It does, not just in wax and wick, but in days of dipping, cooling, trimming, wrapping and checking. When the messenger leaves, you look around the shop with new calculation. You will need more beeswax, more cotton wick, more wrapping paper, perhaps help from a neighbor's boy for delivery day. The rain has made the room dim, but your mind begins arranging the coming work quietly. There is no rush in the thought. Large orders are made from small repeated acts, and small acts are what the shop knows best. The afternoon becomes preparation for the procession candles. You clear space along the back wall for hanging frames. You inspect the stronger frames and tighten their pegs. You count wick lengths and set aside the dry reels. The damp reel remains near gentle air, not heat, slowly returning to usefulness. You cut sample lengths for the first full batch, each one longer than the finished candle by a generous margin. The wax blend must be made with consistency. You weigh by balance, using metal weights that feel cold and dense in your hand. The scale rocks, settles, rocks again. Beeswax on one side, harder material on the other, enough to give strength without losing the clean flame. You shave pieces from the blocks and add them until the balance agrees. The apprentice watches the beam level, fascinated by its quiet authority. You melt the materials together slowly. Different waxes surrender at different speeds. Some soften at the edges and collapse. Others hold shape longer, then suddenly join the pool. You stir until the mixture is even, watching for streaks and judging the smell. It is less sweet than pure beeswax, but still warm and pleasant. The rain outside deepens the comfort of the heated room. By late afternoon, the first batch is ready for dipping. These processional candles will take many passes, and today you only begin them. You tie the thicker wicks to a strong frame, spacing them well. The frame feels heavy even before the wax. You lower the wicks into the pan with both hands, keeping them straight. The first coat clings thinly, the row rises, shining, and the work begins its long accumulation. Down, pause, up, hang. The rhythm is slower with heavier candles. The apprentice steadies the frame while you guide it, and together you hang it from the rack. Drops fall into the tray below, louder than taper drops. The candles are still only coated wicks, but they already suggest their future weight. You let them cool fully before the second dip. Rain taps the shutter again, softer now, almost sleepy. You repeat the dip several times before closing. Each layer adds a little body. The frame grows heavier, and your shoulders feel the effort. Procession candles are not made in haste, and not made in a single day. You will return to them tomorrow, and the day after if needed. Their purpose is movement through the city, but their making is stillness repeated. That contrast pleases you in a quiet way. At closing, the half-made candles hang like pale reeds from the rack. You place cloth beneath them to catch late drips. The room smells of the firmer blend, waxy and warm, with a faint clean sharpness. The apprentice stands looking at them before leaving, perhaps imagining the future procession. You see instead tomorrow's work. More dipping, shaping, testing, trimming, counting. Both visions are true enough. The rain has stopped by the time you step into the street. Florence smells washed, the stone dark and reflective under the evening. Somewhere a candle will be lit for the wake. Somewhere the convent kitchen will use its plain little lights. Somewhere the printer may work beside a narrow flame, and somewhere the seamstress may bend over cloth. You walk through the damp air with the scent of wax following you, while the half-made procession candles wait in the shop, gathering silence around their unfinished forms. By the time you return to the shop in memory, the street has already softened behind you, and the wax chandler's room in 1890s Florence rests without needing your hands. The half-made procession candles hang in their careful row, pale and unfinished, but safe for the night. The molds are cool, the pans are covered, the wick is shut away from damp, and the paper lies flat in its drawer, waiting for another day of folding. Inside the darkened workshop, the scent of beeswax remains in the wood and cloth, warm even after the stove has faded. A few shavings rest in the clean scrap dish. The rolling board leans against the bench. The knife is wiped and still. Nothing asks to be hurried now. Even the candles seem to understand that their work will come later, when someone needs a flame, and until then, it is enough for them to stand quietly in the dark. You can let the day leave your shoulders. The lifting, dipping, trimming, wrapping, and watching have all found their places. Somewhere beyond the shutter, Florence settles into its own low murmur, with footsteps on damp stone, a bell far away, and windows glowing one by one. Some of that light may have passed through your hands. Some of it may not. Tonight, it no longer matters. The shop is quiet now, the wax cooling in its covered pans, the tools back where they belong, and the last warmth of the day resting gently in the walls.